As I've mentioned lately during live streams and elsewhere, I'd not intended to dive too heavily back into politics until the primaries in the fall. But folks, it's 2023 and political season is officially longer than Wilt Chamberlain's dick. But with the recent railroading out of New York and Trump eager to hit the subsequent speaking tour, CNN sprung a trap. Unfortunately for CNN, it was on themselves.
He's the first former president in more than a century to seek a return to the White House, and he is currently leading the Republican field while also facing multiple criminal investigations and an indictment. Just yesterday, he was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation. A Manhattan jury found that you sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll and defamed her. You've denied this. But what do you say to voters who say it disqualifies you from being president?
You triggered my trap card!
Well, there aren't too many of them because my poll numbers just came out. They went up. Okay.
I was just saying there's no evidence of that election fraud. You did once tweet.
You're supposed to say that, but I'm glad you say that. But look,
That's
that was
truth,
a horrible
Mr. President.
election. That was a horrible election, and unless somebody's very stupid, and I know you very well, you're not stupid at all, but you perhaps are given an agenda or you have an agenda. Look.
Will you pardon the January 6 rioters who were convicted of federal offenses?
I am inclined to pardon many of them. I would say it will be a large portion of them. You know, they did a very, and if you remember, I made a video right outside the Oval Office in the Rose Garden, and I'm very proud of that video. I didn't have a script. I don't need scripts like a certain person that's in there right now.
What time, the video, it came out much later after they,
But
no,
why,
you have to declassify
let me ask you a question. Why is it that Biden had 9 boxes in Chinatown, and he gets a lot of money from China? Why is that? And why aren't people...
Trump abused this bitch like he was Whitney Houston and she was a fistful of barbiturates. You can hate the man, you can love the man. You can be one of those pretend undecided voters who claims not to have a side but only ever takes the side of Orange Man bad. Reality is reality, and when Cenk the crank of the Young Turks is pits deep in an olive oil flop sweats 15 minutes in, you know this is going down like the Battle of the Little Bighorn for the Dems. To put it succinctly, this was Trump in 2016 form. Not perfect, though. After all, the man never was. His bump stock ban answer was a bit of a buck pass, although laying the decision at the feet of the NRA was a welcome backhanded remonstration that subtly outed the organization as the single biggest backstabber on our gun rights. But what he did remarkably well was remain on message, even as the sentient pantsuit repeated long disproven lies like the fine people hoax or the Zelensky quid pro quo cock and bullshit. He hit back, rebuffed, occasionally asked for receipts, and on at least one occasion offered an actual receipt of his own. Literally.
And they were breaking into the Capitol, smashing windows, injuring police officers. Why did it take you 3 hours to tell them to go home?
I don't believe it did. Oh, let me pull it out. I have to pull it out. So, on January 5th, the day before, I said, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. Stay peaceful. This was the day before, and this was in the form of Twitter. Now I use Truth Social. I think it's far superior, okay? I hope everybody's like...
He declared his intention to pardon January 6 detainees, initiate mass deportations, deregulate and slash taxes, and before lulberts and black pills chime in with, those are all lies, you ought to tell the left, because for all their talk of Trump being a professional prevaricator, they appear to be taking him at his word.
I just don't really understand why they didn't just cut him off.
I think it was a profoundly irresponsible decision.
There is no sense in fact-checking or replaying the highlights.
I'm sure you're going to have more fact checks for us because there were more lies than I could count.
This insanity should be pulled off the fucking air. Chris Licht, you should be ashamed of yourself. This is astoundingly bad for the brand of CNN. It's astoundingly bad for the country. And it's astoundingly bad, honestly, folks, for every other Republican candidate in the primaries. Wrap that shit up. It's done. You saw this tonight. You know you can't beat him on the stage.
Over 140 officers were injured that day.
And a person named Ashley Babbitt was killed.
Yes.
You know what? She was killed, and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. At blank range, cold blank range, they shot her. And she was a good person. She was a patriot. There was no reason And he went on television to brag about the fact that he killed her.
To those concerned that Trump is martyring Ashley Babbitt, may I offer the following rejoinder. Those who harbor a latent desire for martyrdom invariably find that ambition frustrated should a Capitol Hill police officer, absent a verbal warning of any description, fail to shoot them in the fucking face! I've seen some things on the interwebs, yo, yet scour as I may, I have yet to locate a martyr with a fucking pulse. You remember what a martyr is, right? It's that thing you tried to turn Officer Brian Sicknick into when you publicly claimed he was offed by insurrectionists, and his ghoulish, soulless fucking family even went along with it for a while, only for it later to emerge that he done died of a stroke a day later. Yeah, who knew cheeseburgers were domestic terrorists? And speaking of Judge Fed,
you are letting an insane person stand there and make people giggle and laugh when he jokes about rape. You make people giggle and laugh when he jokes about abortion, when he calls an African-American police officer a thug.
Many of you are upset that someone who attempted to destroy our democracy was invited to sit on a stage in front of a crowd of Republican voters to answer questions and predictably continued to spew lie after lie after lie. And I get it. It was disturbing. It was disturbing to see and hear that person refer to a black law enforcement officer as a thug.
Anderson, your id is leaking. Funny, when I hear the word thug, I consider it defined by a capacity to maraud, rob, or murder. You hear the word thug, and despite spending about as much time in Compton as you have in a titty bar, you immediately associate it with being black? Now seating Dr. Freud, party of millions. Never mind that later in the very same program, Trump described the deeply Caucasian FBI agents that raided his Mar-a-Lago home as thugs.
That, Mr.
And why don't they put this guy Jack Smith and his group of thugs? Why don't they put him in charge of that?
And that's putting aside the fact that these moes basically fucking quoted themselves on air. You know, just because you harbor an inborn affection for the self-same orifice doesn't mean you have to read from the same cue card, you cunts. But I would urge you all to ignore the siren song of Schadenfreude. Not because it isn't hilarious. Hell, I laughed so hard I herniated my hernia. But because for all CNN's apologies over hosting this event, for all of AOC's caterwauling and cramping her culottes, if this event had gone as CNN expected it to, you know, they'd be celebrating it as they carved out Trump's political tombstone inscription as we speak. This was a bigger trap than Jim Sterling, conveniently hosted mere hours after the political prosecution and utterly nonsensical verdict in the New York Trump assault case. This town hall was transparently engineered to serve as both minefield and watery grave for the USS Orange Man. If you saw it as anything the fuck else, my sympathies on the brain tumor. There's just one small hitch in those plans. Taking place in the heart of New Hampshire, site of one of the earliest Republican primaries, the only conceivable excuse to convene the event was to use said primary as pretext and populate the audience with largely Republican voters. And there, you done fucked right up. Because if there's one thing Trump knows how to do, it's identify and tailor his performance to the audience at hand. In front of bipartisan crowds in 2020, Trump appeared muted, almost whispering his way through many of the latter debates with Biden. In front of the home crowd, it's Thunderdome with fucking spray tan. And for the next hour and change, T-Pain pranced his mullet-bedecked Mel Gibson ass all around that shit until at last Caitlin Collins, front woman for the failed political assassination attempt, came slowly scowling to a sobering realization. Hi, holy fuck. He's not locked in here with me. I'm locked in here with him. As events accumulated, the spokesmodel for resting bitch face became more combative to the point of near lunacy. But like a Prius in a mudslick, the harder she spun her wheels, the deeper she sank. At the 3/4 mark, half the laughs in the audience were no longer so much directed at Trump's quips, but bemused chuckling as they watched a rabid chihuahua fruitlessly nipping at the heels of a Great Dane.
Why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them?
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's the
mind?
answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
By event's end, Trump went from being declared innocent of rape to committing one in front of a live studio audience. I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed.
Does it bother you that he keeps talking about 2020 and not 2024? I'll ask you first. This is Jonathan Leslie. He's 40, Republican, voted for Trump twice. How do you feel about those lies?
So I feel like part of it's also the media narrative, as you guys asked him the first question at the town hall about the 2020 election, rather than current stuff.
So don't you think he could say it's time for me to start talking about 2024, not lies that aren't true?
Couldn't the media ask him a question about 2024?
Well, there were questions, but you're right, that was the first thing, but that's something that was on our mind.